Firstly, I would like to stress that nightshades such as Datura are not to be messed with. I take psychedelics occasionally, but I would never even consider taking this stuff. If not for the argument that you go temporarily insane, then at least for the argument that the lethal dose is so fairly close to the hallucinogenic dose. It's scary, hands down. Having said this, I find the stories people come back with are some of the most intriguing of any substance. So the following trip report isn't mine, I'm just reading it aloud. You can find it on Arrowhead, it's called, Oh Rats, It's Deceiving. Okay, let's begin. September the 10th, 2005. Datura inoxia, 2 pods each, freshly picked. Each pod contained over 200 seeds. My boyfriend, 170 pounds, and I, 145 pounds. Ate them in the early evening, got really tired when it set in, and both fell asleep for a couple of hours. I woke to find him looking under the baseboard heater with a mag light. He'd found a bunch of pills under there, he said, but some of them weren't real because they dematerialize when you pick them up. He also told me that our pet rat, Baldwin, God bless your little tail wherever you are, had found some other rats, but some of them looked sick, so he'd put them in a cage. Baldwin was a free-range, hairless rat, to keep them from contaminating anybody. I looked, and sure enough, I saw 2 or 3 rats and a little black mouse in the cage. Then I noticed 2 more sleeping by the alarm clock. There were more burrowing through the laundry hamper, making the whole thing squirm around like crazy. Now, one of the important things to remember about any kind of Jimson weed is that a lot of the time I'm high, I don't even know that I'm totally insane. It's like I forgot I took anything, and it seems perfectly natural for the world to suddenly appear like it does. Well, we came down a bit, and I discerned that the sick rats were a paper towel, a sock, some newspaper, etc. We had a good laugh about it. September 11th, 2005. In this hallucinogenic garden of our eccentric neighbor also grew Datura Stramonium. Unlike the beautiful inoxia, it had no semen in it, no kidding, white trumpets, and instead of the smooth leaves and less spiky pods, the plants were scraggly with worm-eaten pointy leaves, dark, flowerless, and the pods wore armor like so many hypodermic needles I had to wear a glove to twist them off and scoop out the seeds. It looked pretty evil for a plant, and the seeds were more abundant per pod, smaller and darker, and tasted like battery acid, as we chomped down at least 700 seeds apiece at about 8 a.m. That, as you will soon note, is too much. Both C and I are very experienced with tripping. I started with acid and mushrooms at 13 and loved it. Then I went on to love peyote, mescaline, DXM, AMT, DMT, all the way down to toad skins and Brazilian tree bark. Nothing could have prepared us for this one. Again, we fell asleep, and again I woke second. This time, C was talking on the phone to his mom on a screwdriver in the middle of the kitchen floor, surrounded by the inner workings of the coffee pot, trying to inject a spoonful of tobacco and smoking a butter knife, begging his mom on the screwdriver and I for a glass of water. Datura lets us confuse one object of even slightly similar size, shape, weight, or personality with another one, often with strange results. I noticed the rats were back and mentioned it to C. He said yes, they'd come home about an hour ago and were seemingly in worse health than ever before. In the cage was a gruesome sight. A white, big shaved mother rat had been hit by a car or something, and was all ripped apart on the back half with the spine hanging out. In reality, this was the hole in the sock where one would put their foot in. And I could tell by her labored breathing that she was in agony. I had all I could do to hold back the tears while I begged C to put it out of its misery, as she gave birth to litter after litter of rotting stillborn pinkies. This brought the maggots and flies, even some huge spiders. All those cliché tripping stories were coming true, but by then we had no idea that we were schizophrenic and had forgotten that we'd even taken anything. That Jimson weed could convince 2 adults of non-existent rats not once but twice in 24 hours. We didn't know how, since we'd always kept the place tidy, that we'd end up with such a pest problem. It was hard to keep track of how many people were in the apartment. Most of them I didn't know anyway. We agreed that the 2 smelly fishermen who had just left would not be allowed back in. I told the fan not to answer the door, and she said she'd give me a shot of dope since there was coke piled sky high on the table and I couldn't get my dealer to listen to me or to give me anything or pay attention to me since he was so small. He was so uncooperative that the more and the louder I yelled at him, the smaller and more deformed he became until I realized he was a potato in the palm of my hand. The potatoes had pushed off the table by all the coke and this immense jet-black hulk of a man weighing it out in featherweights. No, not potatoes. How could someone be so cruel as to cut off a rat's tail and arms and legs like that? I guess they weren't all dying though, because they were still breathing and moving about and had many scars but no open wounds or blood. The old man and the old woman in our bed were dying. The woman had a bottle of Oxyfast. I told her I needed some as I was dope sick, but she said I'd get no sympathy from her, even after all I was doing for them. She and her husband were so sick and dying, I felt bad and let them boss me around in my own house so rudely, making me brush their teeth for them, cook, and bring them soup made of datura seeds and lotion, ice water, and cold compresses. I shaved her legs with one piece of the inside of that Mr. Coffee that would never work again. The piece looked like something like a razor. As I said, that would be a common mistake on this stuff. The landlord must have found out about the vermin, because by the looks of all the people taking cover in the trash cans outside, they were going to smoke us out. C was on probation at the time with less than a week left, so either the cops or the landlord or the fire department or someone, C said, was going to fumigate us in a second. He put on a pair of jeans, then he put on another pair of jeans over those. I told him he had 2 on, and he took one off again. He said hurry, and I said I couldn't move. I lay on the floor, a little beat up, a blackish eye, and a split brow and lip. C had wanted to get me out of me, wanted to know where I had hidden myself. What did you do with L? I know she's in there, or something to that effect. Obviously, no hard feelings about this. He didn't remember, and I can barely, but I had marks for a week or so. I couldn't move, because most likely I had a concussion, so I told him to go on without me. Save yourself! Save yourself from the cops and the poor Baldwin the rat. The only real rat in the place. From the pest control army that was now advancing on us from all fronts of the house, running hoses under the doors. You'd see the hoses flapping around with pressure gas inside, hissing like snakes and whispering and jumbled warnings, and laughing at us. C put Baldwin on his shoulder, and no shirt, no belt, no socks, jumped out the window and down the fire escape. That was the last time we ever saw our beloved pet. A moment of sad silence. More and more people kept coming to my house. They'd usually knock on the door and I'd open it, and once I did, I couldn't get rid of any of them. Even when I said I had to leave to go look for C, because hallucinations are so damn uncooperative. You can't even physically remove them from your living room when your hand goes right through them. Nuts. There was some little Quasimodo of an albino girl that I might have gone to school with in the hamper now, getting eaten alive by the rats and maggots in there. To be sure, it was all way out of my control. I had to get ready, and I had to find a ride to the party. I met one girl, Jamie, who was homeless and on the road like I used to be. She also carried baby wipes in her satchel for when she couldn't get a shower, which she asked me for, and I felt bad refusing her, but simply I had to get everybody out so I could go find C. C, who took my morphine and supposedly went out to lunch with a bunch of girls and one of my ex-boyfriends from a long time ago, and would show up at the party and better not have given away my morphine by the time I got there. Jamie and I talked very closely for a while though, and found we had a lot in common even though she was dead and I was on a different plane. We could still smoke a joint together, and so we did in the bathroom. Then she packed up her bag, gave me a straight-through hologram hug, and disappeared. We lived next door to a supermarket. I went over there to see if anyone in the parking lot had seen C with my morphine, or had any morphine for that matter. Boy, am I lucky I didn't get arrested. I found out the party was closer than I thought. It was to be held almost right behind my house, down by the railroad tracks. They were using the supermarket parking lot for the overflow. It was full of low-flying bats, birds, and tiny dinosaur-like things, all white or albino. I talked to the ATM machine, the automatic teller, automatically told me all kinds of nonsense. Back at home, waiting for C and my non-existent morphine, I could see them setting up the tents and getting the stages ready for the party, for the big show. It was practically standing room out there. People, ? Of all shapes and sizes and styles of dresses, even some in top hats and monocles and bustles and hoop skirts and crazy African stuff and stilts. I doubted the humanness of some of the entities, including some with more than one head, but I never doubted their reality. I was starting to get upset now, though. Not so much about the pills, but I was worried about C. It was getting darker now, and I walked away from the carloads and truckloads of people pointing at me and talking about me like, "Whoa, what's that?" Now, it was just me and the ghost of Timmy Irving, someone I knew who died a couple of months ago. I'd been asking questions of a telephone pole when he came up behind me and told me it wasn't going to talk back, but I could talk to him if I wanted, like if I ever needed anyone to talk to. A little nicer than he usually was in real life. We walked and talked all the way down the street to the garden where we picked the pods, and then, almost 12 hours later, I remembered that I took Datura and was tripping. The road was flapping like a magic carpet. I could see animals and eyes and faces everywhere. Timmy said if we, me and C, were both tripping on the nightshade on the same night but at different places, I should be able to find him. I closed my eyes and called to him. We are very close, not only in our relationship, but as tripping partners. We've often had mass hallucinations or communicated without speaking, so I had no doubt it should work. He appeared in the Jimson Weed garden, kind of fading in and out like a TV with bad reception. It was hard to see him, and it took all my energy just to get through for long enough for Timmy to disappear and C to look at me with grave seriousness and say, "Find out if I have bail." So I knew he was in jail. He had gotten arrested for allegedly going into the Thai restaurant and asking to drink the fish tank water and eat the fish, then continuing on through Turner Street and then climbing into the back seat of an unlocked car and sitting there talking to the headrests until the police showed up. He thought it was me and his mom in the car, driving us all to the party. In the end, they dropped the charges after he'd said he'd accidentally eaten a poisonous plant and was just temporarily loony. I was crazy for about 2 to 3 days altogether before the posters finally stopped talking to each other, and I couldn't see that design in the carpet or ceiling squirming around anymore. Although this may sound like a bad trip, I wouldn't say so. Too big of a dose and not the right setting. Had the plans been more mature, we may very well have kicked the bucket. I've tried it again, twice more since anyways. The stramonium is stronger than the anoxia by far, though the anoxia gives a worse dry mouth and difficulty swallowing, unless I was just too high on the Datura Stramonium to notice anything. The visuals can tend to lean towards the gruesome and grotesque. It must be the chemical, because I've heard the same from just about anyone that's done it.